그래, 딱 생각 좀 very good. 있으네. 저기 다 류지 지당은 저기 류텔이야. 뭐요거네 삼다베나 아니 그런 지게 샤타就是把它点了，老说这个蒙古就错呢，绿些吧，其他俺那没长辈个，俺女着是热死，绿的啊，就其他那个都是我有可能什么单位那得下的热死，俺那其实你不看没吧，给机票给我做那个去，我都是呢，然后没吧，俺那就年那在那马上用的给下的热死，因为俺那可能俺去开学这里啊。俺这个就米旅店这哪呢？亚的，但这个米六人不吃肉吃，没那他米那就米吃上个，但这个米六人不吃那，俺点点了呀，俺那俺这个必须当去，地位你们去办那结完我那个帮推呀推去呀，点了啥都过来，现在他他把他天气你别个帮对拉你们吃啥的，旅店点了呀，这点旅店现在米在位个，俺点了呀，点那个你们吃啥样子做吧，这都过来是。데네자 저기 류제리아 아니 차신제제 체스된 비원도 지내 차신제 메디바제 하는 아주 류텔에 다데 에네 대디 내갑되는 대우 통보 예비 내갑되리야 안 류티 된데리야 저기 타바다 템지킴비 아니 고방 토이교 개와의 배수신 주국으로의 세상도 그생 한데 되네 쉬로다.
Good evening. So we're looking at last week and the weeks before, quite recently, at our body and the fault of how we relate to it, which is to be greatly attached to it. And we saw how, because of being attached to our body, we put so much time and energy into ensuring we earn enough to have somewhere comfortable to live, that we clothe ourselves properly, and so forth. But when we look inside, we recognize that the way we relate to this body as this object of attachment is completely deluded. There is no essence to find within the body anywhere that is worthy of being attached to. In fact, in reality, this body is a basis upon which suffering naturally arises. Naturally arises because it's in the very nature of being subject to suffering. Hence, we may not wish to experience physical pain, but we regularly do. We may not wish to be ill, but we will fall ill. Likewise, so too will our death come. This needs to be looked at and recognized so as to challenge the attachment we have in relation to our body. And at the same time, we need to ensure that our mind doesn't go off to an extreme, but actually becomes quite balanced, recognizing that whilst attachment to this body only serves to cause us harm, this body itself is an ideal basis upon which, or through, by means of which, we can accumulate causes that will lead to liberation from suffering in its entirety, and even causes for Buddhahood. So, if we can, to the extent we can free ourselves from being attached to this body, yet utilize the opportunity that this human body brings, we can achieve a life of great meaning. So we need to take care of this body, but not with attachment. Sustain it, but not obsessed over our pleasures and our pains. Rather, where we should be putting our attention is not at caring for this body excessively, but put our attention in accumulating those causes that will lead to liberation from suffering and Buddhahood itself.
이산 데네게 제가 돈다랑 저기 류딘디 나 저기 럼림나로 송나 집나다 치오미 다바세 송거 치오미 다바다 남친이 매매 봐자다 한다 저기 류딘데 된 첨보래 사지 된 쳐와래 지나 된데라 한지 계셔도 고래 사지 다저 된 쳐와자 내 남친이 매사다 치오미 다바서 onto Shinto na inbody ndi sumudo adinare.
What's being presented here, you'll know from the Lamaram in the presentation, on precious human rebirth, in particular that these 18 qualities that we have achieved that makes this human rebirth so precious, and in particular that because of these 18 qualities, the great purpose that we can achieve in this life, but it is impermanent. It does not last. Therefore, we need to embrace this opportunity whilst we still have it. So from the Lamrim perspective, this is presenting the two chapters, those are precious, that on precious human rebirth and the impermanence of this life.
that didn't my delia. Didere Kyuki Sungyani, Chida Zewa Mebai, Chodi Jadan Kirjina, Desi Kyuki Jishar Yus.
The 67th verse. Mind, even though you protect it in this way, when the Lord of Death, with neither love nor compassion, seizes and gives it to birds and dogs, mind, at that time, what will you be able to do?
No, then there are seated gazing at the Tinya Shubana Shin, Chojine, and Gasore, are the Lu Sunya Tit, Bed Sosu Ludia, Chashin, Chen Shu, Jitsachimochi, Zisha, Dakwa Debu Guinea, meeting out some Tachi, Denegi, Ludia, Shu Chashin, the Songche, Devati, and then Gawamatuba Ina, and I those in Titarson, this or Denegi Dashing. Ludin Delia, Gicher and Yamlin Jena, Pusun Soba Che Tuyaki, Din Kabachi, Ubi Din Delia, and Gaz, Gawamatubache, and Dusine, Deba Inas, Ditaras. Didn't Debaina, and Kyu Sung Gang, City, Ditar Kyu Sung Gang, Ditarasure. Dinmar, Kazan de Mashusarada, need to say, go and you to Gigi says. I made the Kazan, didn't my lawyer, didn't matter. Didere Kyukyu Sungyani, Chida Zewa Mebai, Chote, Jadan Kirjina, Desi Kyuki Jisha Yus, Dirwa. Jizan, is that Didere said, Dunda Shiorimi. Didere said, Dunda Kalawars, and Rangi Lulia, and Chashin Ye, and Duchene, and the Sungu Katche, and Sedelia, Din Kabrach and Delia, and Sosuke Tabat Tamji Kimbi Gawa doing Yamno Yabadi, Jutu to Nuba Yenayam, Denig Maduba Jet Seti. Ludilia Chashin Jedu, and Dism Sung Che, Deba Nasur, Didras, Denigi Debaina, Kyu Sung Yangas, Chorongi Denigi, Gulkate, Sumba Inayam, and the Chidazawa Mepa is Nimichi and the Chiruguri is older.
So the Tibetan starts with in this way. So in this way links from what we just looked at before, which was that outline which ended in the middle of the previous verse, which is how it's unsuitable to be attached to this body. So we looked there at many of the faults of the body and how we misperceive the body, seeing it as something worthy of being attached to, when we look beneath the surface, it certainly is not. So that's where we come from, that the mistaken way we grasp at this body with our strong attachment. And therefore, we protect it, but we protect it out of strong attachment. So we do take care of it, but our motivation for doing so is not because of its great purpose that can be achieved in this life, but out of desire.
And that didn't Kyu said, Yi around that some Yi did a silver, Yi Kyu, and Ludi in the Somba in Nas or Song Yang Surda, Kyu said, Dushin, Lis Keranging out them with the same deal, Sunga Dangi, Lu, Simpet, Nagria, Tigrias, and Dushin doing it, Sachim, which was in ending out the same deal, Chisang are the same deal, Lutit in Sigurd, Chisang the Kerangi. Giving them Maduba Kerangi, the negative Chimbochuchin, Kazi Suba Inaya, and the image Shiro said.
This word translated as mind. So in this section, because it's come up a number of times, Shantideva is using the word you because he's addressing his mind directly, saying you, mind. So it's our mind that grasps at this body with such attachment, being so distressed when this precious body, this body that one is so attached to, experiences aches and pains and illness and so forth. And it's our mind that pushes us to take care of this body, but again, out of attachment. And even though you protect it in this way, in other words, you protect it through this attachment, so you really take care of it as if something precious and valuable. But again, from the perspective of attachment, death will still come, and this links then into the second line.
나 치다 제와 매바이 치다 세디다 치다 세디나 치다 제와 매바이 간사 두부를 숨도데 디 간사 마르와다 치다 세디 레다 뇽모옹게 라와 매바이 시와데라 아니 치다 시고 치다 일단 한저 치다 세디 레다 뇽모옹게 라와 매바 시도에데라 아니 치다 시고래.
So linking the first and second line. So even though out of this attachment, we care for this body or protect this body, so the Lord of Death still comes. That's the second line, the Lord of Death. So the Lord of Death, as we've heard many times, whilst it's presented as if it were a being, it's not a being, but it is our contaminated karma and afflictions that lead to uncontrolled death. So it's presented in a way as if it were this being taking us from this body into the next life. But it is in reality our contaminated karma and afflictions which cause us to die without any control.
Korang Bezeo, Korang Dakushu, Ninja, Washasha, Sajorvana. Chidan Chida la dine yo mares, Chita said the lead and Nimo Rome, but Chua de Lezeo yo mares, Zewa Mevar, Chidan Zewa Mevanzako, Adu Kerong, Sim Kerong, Ludi Bechi, Dabo Kevche, Chashin Chibuja, Sumba in there. The Kerong Chida, Zewa Yoban, Oda Ninja, the Nigitashin, Korong Chashin, Dabo Yagudus Pashas, then Shayag go Yusirwa. Chidan Chida, Zewa Mevares, Chidan Chida, Zewa Mevazako, Kerong Gaze, chasing Dabo Chession, Jabba Shenje, Pat Dabo Javene, Chio de Gatu, Kayo Mares, or Dagatu Mares, Chidan Shiru Gures or Chida.
Nevertheless, here and very commonly, the Lord of Death is related to as if it were a being. So again, we should understand the meaning that it refers to our contaminated karma and afflictions, but relating it to here in the way that Shantideva means, we take this Lord of Death and be very aware that when it comes to grasp us or seize us from this life and drag us to our next life, we can't appeal to the Lord of Death's compassionate nature and say, please, give me a little bit more time. It's not going to respond to that. When our time is up, we go.
결혼은 균이 셈디 결혼이 풍보배기 풍보를 짜치무시고 다보치고 야고 때 치다디기 레제 라마메가 시니 결혼에 다보 잡아들 초체 파안지 기다 아니지 셈젤 바 잘라서 바 진샤베 제샤베나 그거 사주구는 대세 디리갑레는 결혼을 가르쳐야 지가 셈 결혼기 송교지 투야 가면도 와서 월드가 제민도 와서 대세 기기 지셔야스.
So there's no pleading with the Lord of Death when our time comes. The reality is, our karma and afflictions will bring this life to an end, and we, whether we want to or not, will go forward. And we have no choice over in what direction or to what kind of rebirth we go. Our karma and afflictions aside, we cannot make any special request. Our karma and afflictions determine this. And then at this time, when our afflictions and contaminated karma seize us, this body then can just be given away, disposed of to birds and dogs. And previously, Shantideva, a couple of verses ago, referred to vultures and jackals. So it's continuing the way that when this life ends, the body, all that it is good for then is as a source of food for birds and dogs. Then mind, you that has protected this body so, at that time, when this body is now being fed to birds and dogs, this is the final line, at that time, what will you be able to do?
Gewa tuya de tarbata temje kimbe gowang tuya da gewa chima ngondu chubang toya ki gewe nyamna de ye da de che wuries di gewe nyamna mache bache an chedi zam je so suge dige tunale ya an yulia pa sungyo che chesin je sungyo che de baina an nimiji ane chi shi wuries so je genji le ji shi wuries je za da shi ro de dene shi ro baina dine gewe nyamna che ba kaya mache bache 제 투역이 띵 켜봐진 되는 지어봐지 될이야 나중에 개변념네 가야 맞아봐지 시베나 배 펌부시우리에서 송거를 받아
The essential meaning of this verse is that right now, whatever state one is in, one could well correctly assume that this is the very best that you can hope for what remains of this life. So hopefully all of you are at least relatively healthy, but recognize that each of us has a finite period of time left. This is the final period of my life. It's imperative I recognize this and embrace this opportunity. Use it well to accumulate virtue, because when death comes, if I look back at this period of time between this teaching now and whenever death comes, and I say, actually, I didn't really use this final period of my life well. What a waste. With a mind that is disappointed, you'll leave this life. You won't be able to do anything about it at that time. It will be too late. So now, in this final period, embrace this opportunity.
Dine inza dine ge gewe nyamlan chubores kize maduwa chi dine nyarao meba shi rodu ane shi rodu kabla an sosu ge gyuchala ina kias kayo mar an sosu ge namgi nebe za chimbo shiwu chene je tsungkyub chi pungbo tiya kinyamdo tiru ya chiwa marwa so kaya kero ya kaku jeya yo mata jeya mea kero ya mea res chizada gewe nyamlan jeba ina di anzu shidu kabla ya kewa chima pando ayda diri mato gewe nyam maduwa na sedigi 가제 송급제에게 자침부 송급제의 풍보티 가야 판도 지지하였으니 가르쳐 오래 판도 지가요 말 개와 침마다 가야 판도 말해서 그러다 단다라 디스고 당한 적이 개회냐면 제월마다 개회냐는 맞아 봐제 한 되네기 제투 얘기 띵 해봐 주의도 개회냐면 맞아 봐 시조서나 근데 배 풍보를 시장 개와 침마 풍보다 되네기 유자라서 가야 캠페인에 제산데 폐디 개회냐면 지가래 줍도나 개와디 안주 개와치 말에 팽그리에 제사데 개회념네 제 오래에 습송
When we imagine that the end of our life coming, we recognize this body will be left behind. Perhaps at that time, we'll be quite happy to leave this old, decrepit, feeble body behind. But this, nevertheless, would have been a body we cared for, we took such care of out of attachment. What a waste. Now it's time to go, and we can't take it with us. Even if there's still strength and vitality left, we cannot take it with us. All that will accompany us is our imprints on our continuum. Recognizing this, again, challenge our distorted perspective towards our body. We need to take care of it, but not with attachment. We need to take care of it so that we need to take care of our aggregates so that we can put them to good use. And putting them to good use means accumulating virtue, strengthening our habitual ways of thinking, because it's these virtuous imprints that will serve us well at the time of death and will accompany us to our next life.
양 조데 제단 kirchina 세대다 디갑성은 놈이 삼다에 가서 상당한 저 류티 그디나 이미지 시조를 세비 지원미다가 전고에서다 지원미 치루를 남친애가 요 말에 되네기 근데 취소반에는 바 틱셈데 다 풍보이디 파 카데시 안 셈데마 안 개와 치원 마도 고레스 난디 디니기 저희 갑라 아니 지 소수기다 유너 로제다 류당 인유도 관계자 아니 지마 나 저기 냠의 계절 네 소소리야 개와 치마를 판도 제기 계도야 가요 마치토야 가요 말레스 제가 디니자 디리급리아 개와 주기어바나 저기 개와디 계지 개와 치마데 개와디 지게 개와 좀 먼저 고방토야 딘델이야 아니 지기 디기 주에 요야 차사디 오디션스 용고레스 제가 디니 인상에 제델이야 안데데 양한 류테다이 마시베 파라델이야 아니 개위 자와 강도 주기인 선비게 딘딩에 삼다제 안탈바다 탐지 김묘 고방 토야기 토베제 남님는 지긴습에 삼다제 저기 계주주 고고리에서 다나님보디 디송거다 치워미다 봐서 치워미다와 마젠바이나 저기 최den교만 장아지 인디아리 다가르도 와서 강아라 태제 난 만나나 안에 맹가도야 징입니다. 나선 오다 나 시즈게즈 맹가도 오든지 달라게지 줘야 되지 용구도 지나징아도 시위급라다 최den교래 마시면은 최den교 말아 주사다 되네 인자 당번에 치워디 봐 치워미다와디 안에는 삼다웨나 수수기 기와 치마 원dio 고바도에 타바다 텐지 김에 고바도야 냐마 디버제바니 디버샤야기 삼로디 요코그리에 제다디 삼다제 두스케와 계주도 보고리에 송거다.
It's imperative that we think about the impermanence of this life at least every day, but it needs to become a dominant thought of us, a thought within us, a recognition that this opportunity is finite. My death is certain. And every time we see a reminder of death around us, we should remind ourselves that will be me. And with this recognition should come the recognition that my lifespan is uncertain. I have no idea when this life will end, and it may well come much sooner than I would hope. And this is entirely possible because the causes or the conditions that bring about death are innumerable, but those that sustain life are very few. And when the inevitable comes, this body that I've cherished for and cared for with such attachment, my dear friends and my loved ones who I've also cared for with love and attachment, and all these possessions, these great valuables that I've accumulated and have been so excited about, as well as all the worldly knowledge that I've accumulated, all this will be of no use to me and will be left behind. It's only my imprints that will accompany me, virtuous and non-virtuous. Therefore, now whilst I still have an opportunity, I must apply myself to the Dharma. I must accomplish virtuous minds, become ever habituated to virtuous ways of thinking, become a stranger to non-virtuous ways of thinking. So this sustained determination can only come about if one recalls the impermanence of this life. To the extent one does recall the impermanence of this life, one will readily, easily practice the Dharma. In other words, whatever one's doing, one's mind will be in accordance with the Dharma. Because, for example, when one is in good health and going about one's life, one doesn't think about visiting the doctor, doesn't occur to you. Likewise, if we think we have a vast expanse of time ahead of us, why practice the Dharma? We need to recognize the reality of our situation, and that will stir us to action.
Renyo kodo midublang, guela sopa mijina, ludi nye kyan shendrona, kyogo jite shatang soos.
The 68th verse. If even slaves who cannot be made to work are not rewarded with clothing and the like, when this body, though pampered, will go elsewhere, mind, why do you nurture this broth of meat so?
That Renyo kodo midubang, Sidi, that Yebola sobigi, Tenyo yobo, Tene yobo mitiki seore, Tene yobo tiki, kodo midubas, and that legal lema token, the newer meeting, the Luma newer meeting, and that legal lema to Mebaina, and the Garcias in a Guela sopa, Michinas, that in a out that got legally to go that, Jana minute, and you will minute, so shash and colia, and Kala, and Guela, so about those Matava, and to Shin Chevaro, Jen, Shaba in Asi order.
Look in the first two lines, if even slaves who cannot be made to work are not rewarded with clothing and the like. So this is quite clear from society, not just in the times of slavery. If someone refuses to work, why on earth would they be rewarded? Why would they receive a salary? Or why would they receive recompense in some way? If they refuse to work, they are not going to be rewarded in any way.
Shandrona said that Chesa the Ludi Sosurangita, Shanda Kalamata, Dulomata, Shashavena, Sosurangita, Ludi Sue, Tondala Bezu, and Chig of Shigirwad, Ludi Suekas, New Cassidy, Ludi Suekas or Kalaro, Chip Tusta Sasha, Pam Maran Nea, server in the house, server in the Sueja, and then Nimichik and she near Luda, Semna, Lu, Kawachine, Eva Shand Drogres, a Kawachin Drogres. There's a Chugo Chidi Shatan Swiss, the Niki, Bezu, Shatan Swiss, Ganga Chimbos, Gatse Chimbo, Gale Chimbo, Jeje, Louis Sona Carjavores, has more than that this morning.
The third and fourth line, when this body, though pampered, will go elsewhere. So this is the clear recognition that this body, despite the fact that we have cared for it so, it's been our top priority throughout our life, it will still separate from us. So then it leaves the obvious question, why do you nurture it so, or this broth of meat so? Why do you take such tender care of it when it is going to leave you? And it's going to leave you at a time when you are particularly vulnerable.
Danda and City that the negative Sidan Jivet on it, so by that Dandala, Jiggy Garsuri, Jayo, Nanjin, Ikebada Chandala to me, Yopola so by Tinicina, the Nigian, Lega Sosuchana, Meva Lugi, Nuba Medi, Gabladat, Lega, the Pendomin, Nuba Minus in the Kalada, the Negada call Chiti Ungurada, Legani Pia, La Soba Ungurada, the initiative. Jesa dine into that, so you get that Ganga Jesus, I don't have Tapshitaje, Kalemango, Jeje, Kale, Jeje, and the Subuti, and the Sonk Chigor, the Inea, and the Jiki Kishura, Kaya Duba, Maduba, Chitini, do some near some Sonk of Chen, the Cherashap, Nuba Pandoska, Maras, Sungudua.
The meaning of this verse, it should be quite clear that just like in society, in return for one's labor, then staff are paid. But if they refuse to help, they're not going to be paid, they'll be dismissed. So too here, this body, we've pampered it so, but in the end, it's not going to be there for us. When we are at our most vulnerable, it is going to desert us. Why then are we acting in this way, caring for it so with such attention and attachment, when it is just going to desert us in the end?
That Nyamling, Ton, Duchin, some Dutch Sevena, Jik Chevena, Donda, some Tavina, Net, General said in Azuludi, Semgi, Yobotenero, Chagor, what Agidina, Azuludi, Semgi, Yobukugorwa, Semgi, Ludi, our draws and a dito word, Semdi, Ludi, Garichels and Kishia, Semgi Queen and Kishia, and a jig, Lugi, Guanena, Shin Garchevan, Ludi, Lugi, Nia, Migi, Taya, and Amjoy, Nia. Lugi Lega Lava Kamoto, Shazan and Zugi, Semgi want to Dane, Kuno Dane Chichigora, Chesa Ludi, Semgi Yobo, General Chat Herba, Chesa Semgi Yobo, General Ludi, and Image and Gango, Chachi, Nubakaya, Medicabla, and Semgi Kawachi Wasana, Jetu Nubayoma Rada, Semgi Kawach, Yamne Chawachik Chawasana, Shana Robert Chawasana, Jetu Nubame, Chesa Dinezam. And tell you couldn't Mirona and Della Angola Soba Mijina, Chesa Denegi, Semgi, Janyo, Ludi, Nimiji, and Nuba Chasa, Nyamjaka, and Jetuyagi, Nuba Medicabla, and Denegi, Zugi, and Yamnet Chawasana, Jetuyagi,
The meaning of this verse then is to again draw us back to the honest recognition that firstly, this body is the mind's slave. The mind is the master, the body is the slave, in the sense that the mind directs the body. Without the mind directing the body would not do anything. The very purpose of the body is to serve the mind, in that it fulfills the purpose of being the doorway for the senses. It's through the body that the mind can experience objects of sight, of sound, of taste, and so forth. This is the function of the body. But this body, though, is not particularly reliable. It's gone through a process of immense change, and for most of us, it's in now the process of ongoing decline. It's fast and approaching the point when it will no longer have the strength, the capacity to serve its master. So this needs to be recognized, because we care for it so as if it's going to be everlasting, when this is not the case.
Luida semye kajaje, ta shi de kajo wa kaja sa sura, xian de zhuo kaja. Ci da ma xi nie la. 当然这个的那个开展嘛都捏了嘛些捏了呀，绿汤不有的干不了呀，啊那个这个那对面个嘛当去连连别这些，啊那还有绿的，啊那个就给月下完了呀，点的来给月下完刚头住吧的，结果了也是些，但短的短到什么大的点的是估计是什么。
Recognizing that this body and mind will separate. They will go their separate ways. The mind will move on, and the body will be left behind, languishing here. So before the inevitable happens, make the most of it. Put the servant to work. Make it serve the master of the mind. Make it serve the mind in the way that is most meaningful.
那的呢？那等到来的学了你的个，就开始呢，就绿的，他能不能这个别结巴去结巴别呀？我身边个绿的噻，他咋听不见结巴结巴真个绿的，那就你们去那给区别上些人没到吧的，你们去吸毒不的，吸毒吧那呢？吸为干不了。 아는 지금 풍부와 다 님들 개 가요 말 팬스 가요 말 제자들 개와 마두바치 된 개발진 류디 아니 지게 된델이야 먼저 거번 투투에게 좀네 투투에 봐 탈바다 탄제게 냠을 제 냠을 차단 제게 이거 예디겐 된디 예비둘라 냠을 마셔봐 시선나 풍부시우리스 현재자다 저게 다디디고 예비링이야 소소라랑기 개외 냠는 배배제 제제 나 셈디 저기 류지 셈기 전요 나신자다 셈기 류리야 개위자 자와라 배제 다제 고제 봐 배제 다제 양 개와 주부부리 해서 된다지 소문.
The meaning of these two verses is that despite a lifetime of caring for this body, ensuring that all its needs are met, that it never goes hungry, it never goes thirsty, it's always clothed and warm. Despite all this care, we will, in the end, have to leave it behind. We have no choice over this. We may relate to this body as if this relationship, this connection with it, is everlasting, but this is not the case. So when the inevitable time comes, do not leave this life with regret. Do not leave this life thinking, oh, I hope next life I try harder. I hope next life I apply myself more to the Dharma. Then it will be too late. We do not know what direction we'll go in or how difficult it will be to reconnect with the Dharma. Now we need to utilize what remains of this life to no longer be lost in confusion, lost in distraction, but use what remains of this life well.
Dizan di tingi digi ma ngoso soya di gyuen di pa di gyuen di pa song nongro. Dizan da di doksho gi da ngon jugi yuan di nyamlen che huay di su len go gorwa. Dizan ci di ngoso de chi da zewa yo ma geji chi nge ba yo ma kyorong gi pe lu di ge di na za chi mo chi song gyo che ve na chi da di le di shi de kyorong chi ya ka chi ya skai mi do za da. An di na shin kyorong lu di an di kyorong shen gi Gebola so Yobana City, Nuba Meva Child, Lajata, and the Chikala Kai Matiba Shashi, Kurambe, Kale Jepse, Kala Sage, some Dadin Shebene, and Pandos Kayo Marwas, Bijimiduasi Brigada, Nala, Yuen Dipa, some time, that the dog short Lia, Yuen Dedi, to dog short to Lengo war, Chisnadine Zada, Denegi, Chida Maji, Male Penielia, Nikivium and Chigores, Chisalu, and that lui and Yamlin Cheg, Nuba Yudi Kabla, and Nakasore, giving him Geotukuri, Sachi, Lucian Dengo, also Sonyadi, Guen Masum Gorba, that Indian Lanyamlin Chedi, Doshoti, and so to sling Gorvada.
The meaning of not just these two verses, but this overall section is the verses are presented in a way that are quite confronting, quite direct. And this is to try and shake us up from our misconception about the actual situation we are in. The misconception we are in is this confusion, is that we relate to this body with such attachment, whereas when we look beneath the surface, we see there is no essence worthy of being attached to. So it's quite direct, quite confronting. But the implied meaning is to wake up to the reality of what you have. You are like royalty. If you imagine born into a royal family, it's like the greatest of possible rebirths, with all the pleasures and wonders of a princely life. And in a sense, that is what we each have achieved. We are the masters, and this body is like our slave. So we are like royalty, and this body is our slave. And the meaning of this is to get us to recognize our great good fortune, that we are like royalty. We can achieve the most precious of results in this life. We have received the most fortunate rebirth. There is no rebirth to long for. It is as if we had achieved a princely rebirth. Therefore, utilize this life well. And what that means, accumulate virtue. Strengthen one's habituation to virtuous ways of thinking. Make powerful virtuous ways of thinking your very nature, who you are. This is what we need to apply ourselves to. So apply ourselves to that wholeheartedly from now forth.
The current order chigors and Azuke, some of them had no trading order chigor. Then Azunala some done had the carriers and the social lead the Sachin Burach, made you Yapuins and Besson Takiti in a chick, Chieg, some Mako, Jagitina, Negri, and Bessam logic, and then Yama. Damiki didn't allude to your then at Cassan, Yama Loying Martin, La Casa, and didn't the Mahombanati Lojamatin said, and the Ludi Guarcuni and Troem and the Taba Tembu Sinje, and Sindu and Chiche, this is somebody notary essay or to Chikigore. And the Anchi Ludi, Delia, Ludi and Delia, and the Kiwin and Taba Tamji Kimbi. Go on to the 2 you go over the Hamawache, and the Ludi said this, ya, and did you do a Dunga at the Bejet and you said this, you did some time to the dear notorious. She's like, when you go about Taba Tamji Kimbo go on to you about Hamawadi, then sometimes this some need notorious that the Chida Zewa Meba, Tron Bajin, Kajiri said, and the Jigim. Yobala so Jayo Kalamati Baje, Dushe Shan and Dushin Kajiga said, Dundala, and you some that you're Vada, Gedin as Lude Sachim, Chiwan Madron and Tapa Tembu Himba, and Setin Delia. Citizen ticket to a Dunga say, Tanda Yan do the Mato, Yawachimong and Yokovan Tabata Tajikim, Govato Woods and Pay some Tango Marwa, Geneti some now Matan, some limited notorious, Tijaya some Tanduebana, she do the Antilicora Gures. Cesada, the Dosho has some Tangoresene, Cesada, Pungoing at the Ludi. Tapa Tembo map and meet up a kitchi Shiba Imba, Chivi Ken Manguyoba, do some dangores, Chiwala Ram map a Kedin image Shiro and Peggy, some dangores, di samdang, di samdang by na Chidrona and the Drosang on the Dendri Mavasa and Dendri Kiwachima, Yaga Chuya, Tiko Hudson between you to Bakigris, Chizandikiada, in a Tarbata Tamjikimbo Komatwe, the Yutumba Kigris, Dizinkiwa and Dinikiva, Dendelia, or do you Dendelia, Dini Chasan, Tutueba, Nugo Yuba, the Hawaii, and Dendelia Kivish out to Yes, that Jeza, some Tata, Namgini Chua Madimbe, some Dendi. Denju Ludin di Dendelia, Tabada Tamjikim, Kopashan, Dutuegi, Nuba Yuba, the Hamoa, something you did not reach out to your res. Chesa Delia, the Doksho got some tongues in Pumbody meet up a Kiji, meet up a Ransha Yimba, Namching Eba Meba, or do some Daje, that Ludin Delia, Tabada Tamjikim, Kawaduna, Dutuya Nuba 2, Chesang Itines and a position to gain some big, some tongue worry, this some tongue occasion to Guri, as that the name you were just so.
The purpose of this portion of the text is to shake us awake, to get to recognize how deluded we are, in particular, in how we relate to our body and this life. We relate to this body with tremendous attachment, desperately trying to ensure that this body only experiences pleasures, that it's always the right temperature, that it's comfortable, it's well fed, and so forth. But not only that, we also relate to it as if it were permanent, in other words, lasting, not changing. And this has tremendously harmful consequences. It leads to us to thinking we have time. And this is why we have gone through this life under this delusion of believing we have time. We've met the Dharma, we have an appreciation, a valuing of the Dharma, but we continue to chase after things that have no substantial value because we still believe that tomorrow is another day. There is always the opportunity still to cultivate the Dharma. And in this way, our life largely gets wasted. Our mind is largely on things that have no real value, but we're expecting them to somehow lead us to happiness. We need to recognize, and the purpose of this text is to lead us to recognize the preciousness of this opportunity that we have, that it is finite, and therefore I need to make the most of it. Because every thought that we have that is not geared towards the achievement of Buddhahood in some way is a thought that is most likely just lost in the affairs of this life. We need to think about the certainty of our death and the uncertainty of the time of our death. And when we really think about that, when we recognize none of us can say with any certainty that we will see the end of the week, that we'll even see the morning or arrive home tonight. None of us can say that with complete certainty. Yeah. And when the end comes, we will go in one of two directions. We will have no say. We cannot plead. It will just be our karma propelling us. And at that time, all these tasks and energy and activities that we put so much energy into over this lifetime, all that will accompany us is the imprints we accumulated. Valued friendships, cherished possessions, this body, all that will accompany us is the imprints that we accumulated whilst gathering our possessions, building our relationships, caring for this body. And in this way, we move into our next life, head off into this unknown direction, very vulnerable, and with no certainty that our next life will be as good as this. This reflection we need to do again and again. Hence, Shantideva has been so explicit and covered this part for many verses thus far. The outcome we need to come to is be shaken to recognize the reality of our situation, not relate to our life as being lasting. Recognize that attachment to the body is futile, that it is a servant to be put to work. And with renewed and sustained focus, we need to strive on accumulating virtue, accumulating what will be of value at the time of death and into our next life, so that when death comes, we look back at this life with a mind that's relaxed, spacious, and joyous because we used our life well, and confident that in our new life, we will arise in a good rebirth with excellent imprints. But that will only come about independent on what we do from now until that point.
That is a Dila Langan Jini, Daniel Rangi Dwenje Chuk, Pemba Mebra Dilani, Tamji Jimber Mijawos.
The 69th verse, having given it a wage, make it serve your aims right now. But if it is of no assistance, do not give everything demanded.
Nadi Rabaro should Javana Dila Langan Jini is and Delia Lajat Angembate Chene, Daniel Rangi Dwenje Chuk, Sosorangi Dunda, Duvia Dunda, Larichi Jurashi, Ashes Fungora. Dila Langan Jini. Dani rangi tu jele yalla lacha tangen ba che and rangi tonda tuya tonda la jara che chuose then pando pamba meber dilani tamje chimber mija os pando mewa de ge ho mare se.
In brief, with this verse, the meaning is quite clear. So having given it, so this body, its wage, so this is relating to the verse we just covered. So seeing this body as the servant to its master, the mind, it's doing as it is told, striving in virtue, then give it its wage. But make sure it serves your aims right now. In other words, put it to work. Put it to work for your benefits right now. And if it still does not, the third and fourth line, but if it is still of no assistance, if it still will not to be of benefit to you, do not give it everything it demands.
Denegi signa shinje dondar chi teshe caption dine chi chagdwa na di de ina anjugi chi nyamlen ba to samtana shiraji pera chunguna
That's what they call it, some matana.
Ma de sikti araji de kasura la je nyamba teche rangi donda chi churo che pando mena ka che omarlanna di nyamlen le phe gi sikti dine teshe caption anjugi. But if
you leave the explanation just at that, then the benefit that will come to our practice, to transforming our life, will be rather limited.
Di setting sweet butler. Remember genius the Kalaji, and they put two log in the Sun Chess or remember Jay said that on the Disney Chigi Michi Chili take about Shidwa, that Dondala, in this world, Tilla, the Pumbo Tilla, Rembig, Nambatis, Rembig, that Sosuga, certainly said and Luce earlier, Kala Saho, the Dulo Conga Chorwa, Luce earlier, Dingambatis, Kalada, Lusegi, Donala, Kalada, Dulo Sunjaptiche, other and Casupici or his or Dilanga Bacini said, Dona Disumore.
So looking at the first line, having given it, so it being this body, a wage, the wage here would be sustenance. So having taken care of this body, ensure it's properly food, given healthy food, it's clothed, it's housed appropriately. So this is the meaning then of a wage here. It would be sustenance.
to legale madone ne kala chiki yomar sa dinashin da ludi nibo meba beje cheda beje meba na tanga nyamne chitu mara dine enza Lu Yamle Chabala, and Tarbatum Kimbo Koban to begin Yamle Chabala, Lu Tindi Yabukovaza, Delengamba Chin Sidu, Segu, Dogo Lasoba, Ramba Chimboris.
Because in order to live a meaningful life, which is the accumulation of the causes that lead to liberation and enlightenment, we need a healthy, strong body. So if we're constantly ill or we struggle physically, this is an impediment. Whereas if the body is healthy and strong, it's easier to focus on accumulating the causes for liberation and enlightenment. Therefore, for this purpose, we look after this body, not out of attachment, but so that we have a healthy, strong physical foundation to practice.
Dani rangi donje chu sida dani sida chizada du diring anzo ki tinigi ten sampo top jiban telia ten telia dadine songche du diring dadine songche rangi duen ane rangi duen tardu sanji goban topi chirdu ane kiwi nyamlen jegori ese songora dani rangi donje chu se rangi duen tardu ane sanji namkin goban topi chirdu ane kiwi nyamlen jegori jeto chuk jegori.
Recognizing that there isn't time to waste from right now, so the second line, from right now, we put this body to use. In other words, utilize this opportunity to accumulate the causes that will lead to Buddhahood. That is the meaning of aims or benefits. Ensure that this body is utilized to accumulate the causes that will lead to Buddhahood.
rangi duen sido rangi de la tse di samje rangi digi tuya de rangi chachorwa rangi rwa and jewa chima ngondo ko ba rangi jewa chima ngondo ko ba thoba cheba ne ngondo ko ba de rangi ru chagurwa 진짜다 tarbagi rangi koyu dunga le thadal treje tarbe ko ba thoba chin thoba ne dia rangi ru chagurwa da dadi de rangi duen siadi 기와치마 전 다디디 타바침 비비 최시베 송비 까빈자 다 랑기 된세데 상기기 가소데야 야 안에 냥 가서 미니베 냐데다 이시 최고이디 최고세데 랑된 차고 랑된 최고들라 모니고데 이시 최고 신이샤고와 디니데 랑된 고세어 제자다 랑된세 제자다 랑이 묘 가서 탈친 바디 당보 랑이 탈친고를 해서 다 랑이 탈친고를 해서 제가 랑이 랑기 류된 다데 단주 류된 뒤에 갑래 디 류된들이야 세다 또그 렘바 점이 저한테지는 수부티 된들이야 랑기 돼안 탈친고를 해서 탈지랑기 돼 탈친에 돼 아니 원이고 대시 추고 고방 톱보를 해서 디 톱이 치도 아니 가서 그래 개변님의 제고를 해서 다들 갑자기 랑된세디 랑된 최고다 이시 원이고 이시 최고 이디 데르고 랑된세디 디토비 치도 단념의 제고를 해서.
So the term translated as your aims or could be your benefit, your purpose. So usually when we hear that, it would, or when we see this, it would refer to perhaps this life, to looking after yourself in this life. But from the Dharma perspective, your aims would refer, or your benefit would refer to accumulating the causes for excellent rebirths and or your own liberation from samsara. But this being a text of the Mahayana, what your aims or your benefit would refer to is of the bodies of a Buddha, refers to the Dharmakaya, in particular the wisdom Dharmakaya. So that is what is presented as for your aims, whereas the form body is presented for the aims of others. So here, being a text of the Mahayana, when we see something about, see your aims, we understand that refers to take care of this body, give the body the sustenance it needs so that you can accumulate the causes that will lead to the attainment of the state of omniscience.
롱고단 주고 세정한서 수부 구셔로 데라 셴데뉴 구세고 셴데뉴 구 지상 구시 세디 송여 네 지사다 나 꾸니 시대 랑된 꾸단 현대 꾸니 세네 꾸니 차용을 제가 랑된 꾸라되데 랑된 현대 꾸시대 수구티시월 제가 수구 꾸된 현마 제 최세리아 현기 수구된 제 최선 마도제 수구 마든데 최 녀제 제투 말와 최주투 말와 제가다 현기 된 제발라 수유 그런거든 주기 넘바 된제마 현기 현래 최된제 나마 최선 냠내 제 판도 주현 거기 동안을 저에게 탐름된 발라 수고진 짐이지 고고월 민자 대신에 수고시월 날 제자 라니기 되네기다 샬리아 최된 판도 주발라 라니 견 탐제단 드라이브 또바 윤된 탐지 마토반의 타르메 침반나 랑게 된다 타르마 침반나 되는 샬리아 제통 말와 되자 랑된 최고 라니 녀모 버티바 파샤데 제바 뻥비 뻥바 토고 그래서 라니기 최남지 원순도 비 켐바디 켐고 그래서 디나 랑기 된다데 다시는 주발라 랑로 고야기 윤된디 타르침바레스 제자 현대사 제자 랑된디 제자다 랑된 최고디特别 치르도 안에 냠는 지오레스
So it's good to understand how this term is used in the Mahayana. So a Buddha has bodies. It can be presented as 2, 3, or 4 bodies. So if the 2 bodies, there's the Dharmakaya, the truth body, so the mental body, or the mind of the Buddha rather, and there's the form body or the Rupakaya. So that's the physical body of the Buddha. So both of those have 2 subdivisions. So the Dharmakaya, the omniscient consciousness, has 2 divisions: the nature truth body and the wisdom truth body. And here, your own aim, this refers to the wisdom truth body. And this is the cultivation of the wisdom, the elimination of all faults from the continuum, the afflictions together, the seeds and the stains of the afflictions. This leads to the development of the Dharmakaya, in particular, the wisdom truth body. Together with that, though, one accumulates the causes that lead to the Rupakaya, or the form body, which also has 2 types, the enjoyment and emanation bodies. So when the Bodhisattva moves from abiding on the 10th ground and arises as a Buddha, this new Buddha arises simultaneously in all 4 bodies. But it is said that the Dharmakaya, the omniscient consciousness, is for the use or the benefit of the Bodhisattva, in the sense of their faults are completely eradicated and all qualities are perfectly developed, because that is the omniscient consciousness, the perfect consciousness. But with that perfect consciousness, it is limited in how it can directly interact with others. It requires a form. And that is why the Rupakaya, the form bodies, the enjoyment and emanation bodies, are said to be for the benefit of others, because it's these that interact with other beings, either in terms of the enjoyment or emanation bodies. So therefore, the form body, which is what interacts with others, is said to be for the benefit of others, but the wisdom body is said to be for the benefit of that being, because it's what is attained when the consciousness is perfected. But what we see from this, though, because these 4 bodies are achieved simultaneously, one has to achieve one's own aim in order to benefit others. So therefore, one accumulates the causes for both the wisdom body and the form bodies together.
Then suju go da chu go sa je ku ni se de suju go da chu yu ku ni se ro ku ni lam na de din na de ku shi du de re je da suju go da chu yu ku slam na san ye ye su yu ku de la na ka su ku se de chu ku se ni se da ai ku shi la yu de su ku de ba ni che che long go de ju se ni ye ni che chu yu ku de la na ngo ni go da mo ye shi chu ku se ni che we na da ku ni shi sha so ro che na 최근에 니체 수유고라 니체는 시샤선 제가 구시라네 단다 구시디레 구니라네 모니고데 이시 가서래 수고다 추군이데 샤월 티나 구시디레
when one hears about the bodies of a Buddha, again, it can be presented as 2, 3, or 4. So if it's presented as 2, it'll be the truth body and the form body. So form body is clear, it's the physical body, and the truth body would refer to the consciousness, the omniscient consciousness, or in Sanskrit, the Dharmakaya and the Rupakaya, the body. If it's divided into or presented as 3, then it's usually the Dharmakaya, the omniscient consciousness, is presented as 1, and then the form body, the Rupakaya, is presented as 2, as the enjoyment body and the emanation body. And if it's presented as not 3 but 4, then the form body, which has already been divided into emanation body and enjoyment body, remains, but then the Dharmakaya, the truth body, is divided into 2, the wisdom truth body and the nature truth body.
That the Sujuku de la Shandijuku, or Shandiju and the Sujuku de Luku, or a cousin, Shandijabala Sujuku, number 20, Shandi, Tenduka, Shandi, Sujuku de la Shandijuku, or the Longo da Tukuni de la Shandijuku, or that Ranchu de la Randijuku, the Rani, and then Yomo Pasha the Chabala, Tarchimbala, Rani Kutogoza, the Randijuku search. On those in the round, Bendigo Picinalia, Shandi Yukuda. Ne random kusia say do that Shenu Koledo, so what you go water, random Kula in the show what you go water.
And again, so I've translated this in the second line as your aims, but it can be translated as your benefits. So this refers to the truth body or the Dharmakaya, and this is said to be for one's own benefit. And it arises through the complete abandonment of the afflictions together with their seeds, but also the stains. So the mind is completely purified, which means all good qualities are developed to the point of perfection. This is the attainment of the omniscient state. And so here, the being themselves has attained perfection. So therefore, this is said, it's for their own benefit. But this comes together with the form body, the Rupakaya. So in its 2 parts of the emanation and enjoyment bodies. And the reason that the form bodies are said to be for the benefit of others is it's through a form, through a body, that the Buddha can interact with beings. If the Buddha only had a Dharmakaya, it could not teach and guide beings. It requires a form to interact with others. Therefore, the form body is said to be for others, for the benefit of others.
Dondala da Tsingi di Langamba Chini, Tindani, Rangi Tunje Chu, Sidi Dilla, Sidi Tang, Pumbo Dilla, Rangi Tenju Lutingi, Pumbo Dillas, and then Gambachi, Sidi Togu, Remba Zemji, that Remba Zemji Togu Tushin, Sochin, Sokures, Soneda, Tindelia, and Anzugi, Tindelia, that in the Sonche, and Anzugi, Rangi Tuen, Tartuk. Shuyuku Tobi Chirdu, that's over Sanjoko Tobi Chirdu, or Sanjoko Tobi Chirdu, Randin Chugo Tobi Chirdu, and the Kivian and Basic Shigores, Donadi Sumkort the dignity.
So then the meaning of the first 2 lines again is that it refers to this body should be sustained. So that's the wage. Sustained, in other words, looked after, and shows that it's in good health and good health. And the purpose of being in good health is to strive for Buddhahood. The second line, your aims, to strive to become a Buddha.
Taniba Dilla, Pemba Meber Dillani, Tamjimir Mijawa, say Pemba Meber Dillani, this Pumbo Siwada, Pemba Meber Dillani, Siduta, the Remba, the Maimba, and the Choshe Meba, and the Pumbolia, and the Jixia, Gueda, Lasoba, Jiguayom Haresoda, Gazadangas Diroda, Choshe Meba, the girls who are chicken, Lutseg, the Choshe Mabata, Marasa, Lasopata, the Chuchi, Yamlinche, some Dango, Citizen Yutinigi, Tonejisa, Laso, Duloya, Chevata, Maragoya, Lasopata, the Ungurua, Cizadini, this Chuyamlinche, Alapendo, Mares, or Chuyamlinche, Ludi, and Yahoo Go, Yahoo Koala, Korongi, Remba, some Yakala, Church and Tigores, or the Chele Haba. And then Miremba, and the Denigi Javaina, subul nugires chezadi nugires chen chue de nyamlen chebala nugiri pando yomar denigi ane segue chiye ge tandalya yang lega mambo chego sra de dirwada denigi lega mambo chego za ane chue chele nugires an doshine cheza pemba mebar dilani cheza chue chebala barshi doya da chue chebala nyamlen chebala pando me de hengi an denigi se dogi phungbolya 가서래 초시에 매바제 두스체네 베시 땅고요 말해서 진리시다 같이 베시 땅고 말해서 그거 베시 땅고 말해서 제자진 탐지 진벌 미자오 와서 판도 매바 리델이야 안 초시에 매바 또그 세디점이 또그 단다 두스체네 베시 땅고요 말해서 제자진 진벌 미자오 와서 베시 땅고 말해서 그러다.
The third line, but if it is of no assistance, it again refers to this body. So if this body is not being of assistance, then by this body not being of assistance, we need to recognize, hang on, I'm still caring for this body, but it's not being put to good use. It's not creating any benefit. It's not helping me progress towards the fulfillment of my aims, in other words, Buddhahood. But yet, I'm having to take care of it. It's like I'm giving it a wage, but it's not doing any work. I'm having myself to do all this work, engage in physical activity, mental activity. In other words, my life is being consumed to look after this body, but this body is not playing its part. It's not helping me accumulate the causes for enlightenment. Rather, it's just consuming my energy, my physical energy and my mental energy. And in fact, it's an obstacle to my spiritual development.
On Jisandala Pemba Meba Sidu, that Choshe Mebas or Choshe Meba, Sedi Yamlen Jevala, Pemba Medic, the Choshe Mebigi, Segu Dogula Soba, Zation Ba Luliba, Diche Umare, Sage, the Nadikobore, Tisan, and Pemba Meba, Dilani, Luteli, and the Segula Soba, and the Nigi, Jimber Misha Sedita, the Nigi Peshi Tango Mare, Tango Mare S, that Dandala and Ludi. 냠내 제라 개외 냠내 제와 개외 냠내 제발로 류디 초와 초진 지섬지 세 도고시라네 디고레스
Chicken sheepa.
미자와 세제 제고 말했어데 지다 비시당고 말했어요. 탐지 집안 미자와서 류디리아 최주발라 냠내 집아 판도 매바 아니 촉시에 매바 나다 초시 매바나 딜르노 디오 실레르다 데니시네 삼다제 먼저 초시 매베기 이제 도외라서 죽제 안내가 베지 땅고 말레스 짐벌 매체스네 베지 땅고 말레스 월다를 소스 삼다이데.
The third and fourth line, but if it is of no assistance, do not give everything demanded. So if it's not being put to good use, you'll recognize that because your mind is not content. And so how it's being expressed here is that your body is demanding things. It wants this, it wants this, it wants this. So the body is not content. It wants ever more. It wants to be cared for, sustained, looked after, treated so well. So the way of recognizing one's lack of contentment is through the body demanding continuous attention and care. This is not right. We should not be fulfilling these desires. The body is to be used as a precious tool, but that is what it is. It's not something to be pampered so.
도게 제에 초시 균에 매딩에 초시 매비게 삼로 디게 돈데 도게 제에 주어데 인 초시 매비 삼로디 노트리에서 월다가진데 디 삼로 디게 지나다 지그라나 다노 디오디 조에 매바 tin 초시 매바 기에데 딘디 디원기 안에 지기 주시에 다 고마고야 라서바다 고화단에 라서바다 소수게 안에 매제 되는래 착하게 착바 슈철셔도야마도 안에 랑을 판도야 말에 제상 최주배 냠내 제일 팽팽이 말에 되느기리에서 제가 디네 장 촉시 매바 토네 안에 지 벤처 두야디 제고 말에스 안에 가르쳐오래 랍나 랑기 류디다 냠내 제발라 랑기 류디 소고고래 소고가 在 델리아 맞아 스토그 rem바 점지 베지 도시네 최근 rem바 점지다 Beshe Tangine, and Beshe Tangkurs, and that Beshe Tangin Tindelia, and Sosurangi, then the Sanjuko to be Chirdo, and then giving him like Beshe Chivore, as Beshe Tangor, to Kuri, as such, then that is Mudua.
So then the summary of this verse is, if we lack contentment, we will continue to be dominated by attachment, desiring this, desiring that. In this way, our time and our energy is consumed, and we will be engaging in non-virtue, because our attachment will lead us. We won't merely sit idly desiring this and that. We'll seek it out. We'll take advantage of others where we can so as to fulfill this insatiable attachment. We will take advantage, deceive others, lie, cheat, and steal. We will cause harm to others, and we'll justify it so easily because of this lack of contentment. So rather, when you recognize this, take care of our mind, utilize this body in the way that one should, which is to accumulate virtue. To the extent that we are living this life, accumulating virtue, then the sustenance we give to this body is well deserved, well earned. The very purpose of this precious human rebirth, this very body, is to accumulate causes that will lead to Buddhahood. This is where we should put our time. This is where we should put our energy.
Jitarikyu Sonjani, Chida Zewa Mepa Yisri, Denichida Zewa Mepa Yisri, Sosorangeta, Namji Neme, Gedinachi Chidugure, Leda Nyomo Yenji Ted, Rame, but Chidu Chine, Gatuya Kaya Mares and Bedinichiwa Metabachi Samda. And the Jayoko Mituba Seduda, Ludi, that Machiba Inaya, Kengocha, Ne Nasagi, those two are the Yamne Mutu, Nubameva Charter with Char, Nimichi Chai in Charter, as and begin on Duchin some danger. And then you get at it, oh my get, Lang engineers, Della Lang engineer, Danny, Radu, Jedu Chuk said, the nigger some that Nimichi Shiru, and Mashiva Naga can wash Nubameva, Yamne Gemma, Simgi Jawas, and the Gemma to watch it in which the Charter with Charias, Sembe some da, and that so that Ludi Tango Yoba, the Nigi Chetu and Nuba Yudi Kablia, and Sosu Lulia, and the two Tungi and the Rembats and we do special dance, and Beja Ma, the Kartangors, and Sanjiko to be Chirdo, and giving him the chair the Besh Tangori acid, and that is one that day.
Summarize the three verses in a couple of sentences. Firstly, we need to carry an ever-present awareness of our mortality, an ever-present awareness that our time is limited, to recognize that our death is certain and the time and manner is completely unknown. Therefore, we need to utilize what remains of this life. Because when our death comes, even if our to-do list remains incomplete, as it will, we cannot plead our case and ask for more time. Even if we haven't used what remains of this life well, we cannot plead our case and ask for more time. Therefore, we need to focus from right now, on what matters. And that is accumulating the causes of virtue. We won't be able to take our body, our friends, our possessions with us. All this worldly knowledge we've gained will all be left behind. Just our imprints will accompany us. We need to focus on accumulating the virtuous karmic imprints. With whatever time we have, with whatever energy we have left, we need to ensure our mind is in the direction of virtue. And finally, keeping in mind or bearing in mind what the meaning of a meaningful life is, this is the life we must live. A life where we focus on accumulating the causes for Buddhahood. The very lens through which we engage in our various activities should be the accumulation of the causes that will lead to Buddhahood. The motivation behind all we do is to accumulate causes to be of the greatest of benefit to others. And then thank you. We'll conclude therefore tonight.